She built everything from scratch: a thriving salon, a beautiful home, and a family people envied. But the one person she trusted most watched it all like a man with a stopwatch, timing her every move, waiting. They said he served his country with pride, a veteran, a husband, a father. But behind the medals and morning coffee was a man whose failures were louder than his vows. And when money got tight and temptation got too close to home, he didn't just break her heart. He orchestrated something no sane person could explain, and dragged their own son into it. What happened inside that house the night she died wasn't just violent. It was unthinkable. But it wasn't random. It was planned. And the worst part? It worked. For a while. To anyone passing through the quiet neighborhoods of Peoria, Illinois, the Wynn residence looked like stability. A freshly painted two-story home with trimmed hedges, a spotless driveway, and one of those seasonal wreaths on the front door. The kind of house that whispered normal. Inside it lived a family that, on paper, was enviable. Curtin Wynn, now 52, was a decorated veteran. He wasn't one to boast, but the folded flag on the bookshelf and the photos of him in uniform said enough. He served 16 years, just 4 shy of full retirement. Injuries and politics got in the way. That's what he told people anyway. The neighborhood respected him. When Curtin spoke at block meetings or gave advice at the barber shop, people listened. His wife, Pauletta Wynn, was something else entirely. Elegant, measured, and deeply admired. She ran one of the top natural hair salons in the city. Not in a strip mall or crammed plaza, but in a newly renovated space near downtown. High-foot traffic, professional clientele. Her business didn't just survive, it flourished. What most didn't know was that Pauletta came from quiet wealth. Her father, who passed when she was in her 20s, left her with a well-structured inheritance and life insurance. She was his only child. Her mother had died young. Pauletta was the kind of woman who never wasted pain. She built with it. Together, Curtin and Pauletta had one child, Marquise Wynn. At 23, Marquise had yet to figure life out. He'd bounced between warehouse jobs, community college semesters, and small online hustles. He was polite, usually kept to himself, but something about him always looked slightly unfinished, like a blueprint without walls. He wasn't spoiled, but he wasn't grounded either, especially not lately. Gambling apps had become a silent addiction. Borrowed money from friends never got repaid. He often woke up past noon. Still, from the outside, they looked tight. Christmas cards, vacation photos, matching church outfits on Easter. What people didn't see were the silences at the dinner table, the subtle looks Pauletta gave when Curtin came home late, or the way Marquise barely made eye contact with either of them anymore. On the day of Marquise's 23rd birthday, Pauletta went all out, catered food, gold and black decorations, a backyard setup with string lights, music, and more guests than Marquise probably expected. Curtin played host with a drink in hand, moving from grill to patio like a man with no worries. He told jokes, bragged about his military days, talked business. But underneath his smile, his eyes moved fast, scanning, watching, always watching. That's when she showed up. Her name was Skyla James, slim build, soft curls, gold hoops. She wore a simple sundress and smiled like she belonged. Marquise introduced her as his girl, and Pauletta smiled politely, saying they'd heard a lot about her. Curtin said nothing at first. He just looked. Not with suspicion, but with something more dangerous. The kind of look no father should ever give. Skyla laughed loudly at Curtin's first joke. touched his arm once when he handed her a plate. Pauletta noticed. So did Gloria Ford, Pauletta's older cousin, who'd known Curtin long enough to catch the flicker in his gaze. Neither woman said more, but something had shifted. And Skyla, she wasn't leaving any time soon. Curtin Wynn used to wear his uniform like armor. It didn't just fit him, it completed him. 16 years in the U.S. Army shaped everything about him. How he walked, how he spoke, how he saw himself. He wasn't just a man, he was a provider, a protector, a leader. But that identity began to crack the day he was discharged. It wasn't honorable. It wasn't dishonorable either. Somewhere in between. A paperwork limbo that veterans know too well. No pension, no solid fallback. Just a pat on the back and a list of VA numbers to call. He blamed politics, said he was targeted. Maybe he was, but what followed had less to do with the military and more to do with who Curtin really was when no one was saluting. He tried to pivot. First a trucking company, then a small private security firm with another veteran. It failed within months. Pauletta offered to help, but pride got in the way. Curtin started borrowing friends, old army buddies, even a short-term loan shark. It didn't last. He tried flipping cars, vending machines, forex trading. Everything either collapsed or got buried under mismanagement and ego. Curtin didn't know how to follow. He only knew how to lead. And now, there was no one willing to be led by him. The resentment festered quietly. Pauletta's salon was booming. Her client list read like a who's who of local professionals. The kind of women who drove German cars and tipped in cash. The kind who called her by her first name with reverence. Curtin would sometimes pass by the shop just to watch the women walk out. Laughing. Well-dressed. Confident. And his wife, at the center of it all. He never said it out loud, but it showed. In the sighs, the passive-aggressive questions, the way he'd say, "Your little business," when Pauletta talked about expanding. But the real fracture came when Curtin learned about the size of Pauletta's inheritance. He knew she came from money. What he didn't know, until he saw the bank statement left open on her desk one evening, was just how much. A 7-figure portfolio, dividend payouts, land leases from her late father's holdings. She hadn't hidden it, but she hadn't explained it either. She assumed he knew. Or maybe she feared what he'd become if he did. That night, Curtin drove aimlessly for 3 hours, ended up in a bar 2 towns over. That was the night he met his first escort. He didn't even remember her name. Just the silence that came after. It felt like control, like escape. And from there, it became routine. He justified it at first, said Pauletta was too busy for him, that she didn't see him anymore, that a man had needs. But deep down, Curtin didn't want comfort. He wanted revenge. Quiet, invisible revenge. The kind you don't speak about. Just feed until it grows into something you can't kill anymore. By the time Marquise turned 20, Curtin had a second phone, a burner email, and a growing pile of debt that Pauletta didn't fully know about. His credit was wrecked. He was months behind on his car note. He owed back payments to 3 different online loan apps. Yet, to the outside world, he was still Curtin Wynn. Ex-military. Church volunteer. The man who shook hands firmly and kept his lawn cut short. Neighbors greeted him with admiration. He was the man people called when they needed a generator fixed, a resume edited, a child mentored. He played the part perfectly. But inside the house, he snapped too quickly, drank too often, stayed gone too long. Pauletta stopped asking questions. And Marquise, he learned how to avoid his father's moods before he learned how to pay a bill. Curtin didn't become a monster overnight. he rotted slowly. And no one saw it until it was far too late. Pauletta Wynne had always been the kind of woman who made things work. She was barely 12 when her mother passed, a quiet death from an aggressive cancer that swallowed their home in silence for months. From then on, it was just her and her father, Charles Ellis, a man of few words and rigid routines. He raised her on discipline, faith, and financial wisdom. There were no fairy tales in that house, just books, balance sheets, and Sunday mornings at church. Charles wasn't warm, but he was steady. He made his money quietly, investments, a few rental properties, and a trucking logistics company that grew beyond what anyone expected. By the time Pauletta turned 22, he was already planning to retire. But death came first. A stroke in his sleep. Just like that, she was alone. Again. But Charles had left her something. More than money. A blueprint. A well-organized trust account. Real estate deeds. Letters with instructions. A financial advisor he trusted. Pauletta didn't waste it. She studied, networked, and moved with precision. Within 2 years, she opened her first salon. Not a rented chair in someone else's space. Her own name on the lease, her own staff, her own design. Natural hair care, scalp therapy, protective styles, things that black women lined up for. Business boomed. By the time she met Curtin at a friend's baby shower, she was already seen as that girl who made it. He was tall, composed, and charming. A veteran with strong shoulders and softer words. He made her laugh. He listened. And he said all the right things about building together. Back then, she believed in the power of partnership. So she let him in. At first, it was good. He supported her, handled things around the house, made her feel seen. When Marquise was born, Curtin was fully present. Diaper runs, night shifts, school meetings. And when Pauletta opened her second salon location 5 years later, he threw the launch party himself. To the outside world, they looked like a black power couple. Resilient, progressive, enviable. But something shifted after Curtin left the military. He came home quieter, restless. At first, he said it was just adjustment. Civilian life took time. But then came the mood swings, the overspending, the mysterious new friends. His sleep became erratic, his excuses more frequent. Pauletta found a betting app notification on his phone once. He brushed it off. Then she noticed he was always stepping out after 9 p.m., often returning long after midnight. Pauletta started quietly documenting things. Not because she expected the worst, but because she'd spent too many years surviving to ever be blindsided again, and yet, even with all her preparation, all her wisdom, she had no idea just how far her husband was willing to go. Skyla James had the kind of face that made people underestimate her. Wide smile, almond eyes, voice just above a whisper. She dressed like someone who lived in two worlds, cropped hoodies and box braids one day, silk blouses and press-ons the next. You couldn't quite place her. And that was the point. When Marquise introduced her at his birthday party, Pauletta sensed the caution in her son's voice. Not shame. Something else. Like he hadn't decided if he was proud or nervous. Skyla shook hands gently, laughed too easily, and thanked Pauletta 3 separate times for the invitation. Curtin, watching from the grill, barely blinked. But later, as he carried trays back into the kitchen, he asked Marquise, "That your girl? Or just someone you entertain?" Marquise smirked and shrugged. "We vibin'." Nothing too serious. That was all Curtin needed to hear. Skyla started coming over more often. At first, it made sense. Pauletta wasn't surprised. Her son had a habit of pulling people into his orbit fast, but it was how Skyla moved through the house that stood out. She didn't just stay in his room. She lingered, laughed with Curtin in the kitchen, wore fitted clothes without flinching, asked Pauletta bold questions about the salon and her skincare routine, then casually slid back to Marquise's room like she hadn't crossed any lines. One night, Pauletta walked into the living room and saw Skyla on the couch, alone, watching TV in leggings and a tank top, no bra. Curtin sat a little too close, his body angled, his eyes slow. Pauletta said nothing, but the room felt like it dropped in temperature. She mentioned it later to Gloria in passing. "That girl too comfortable in my house," she said. Gloria raised an eyebrow but didn't press. The truth was, Skyla wasn't just confident, she was calculated. It started with small moments. Curtin brushing past her in the hallway, and her not moving. Her compliments toward him becoming more personal. "I like your cologne, Mr. Wynne," or "You keep your skin tight for an older man." Then came the late-night incidents. Times when Marquise was gone, and she'd show up anyway. One night, she claimed she left something in his room. Curtin let her in. Another time, she said Marquise had told her to wait for him. Curtin didn't question it. He poured her a drink instead. By the third time, the excuses disappeared. So did the boundaries. Curtin crossed the line first. A kiss in the kitchen. A quiet invitation when Pauletta was out of town visiting her godson. Skyla didn't resist. She leaned into it. Not because she was in love, but because she saw opportunity. The older man with the money problems and the bitter marriage suddenly had a secret. And secrets had value. Curtin fell quickly, called her baby in private, started talking about the future like it was already written. "You and me? We could really start fresh. Once all this settles," he told her during one of their late-night hookups. "Ain't nobody holding us back but this house and what's in it." He never said Pauletta's name, but he didn't have to. Skyla just smiled. She wasn't naive. She didn't trust Curtin any more than she trusted Marquise. But she understood the game. Make a man feel seen. Make him feel young. Make him feel like you're his reward for surviving disappointment. In truth, she was never loyal to either of them. She liked what Marquise gave her. Weed, rides, a place to crash. She liked what Curtin promised her. A new life, a payout, a future. She didn't know how far either of them would go, but she knew exactly how to keep them both wrapped around her finger. And that was enough. For now. Curtin didn't present it as a plan at first. He made it sound like a thought, a random observation spoken between father and son during one of those tense, late-night conversations they hadn't had in years. "You ever think about what your mom got stashed away?" he asked one night as they sat outside, both staring at nothing. "Like real numbers?" Marquise, half high and low on patience, shrugged. "She work hard. She's smart. I ain't in her business." Curtin chuckled. "She got a policy over $500K, just sitting there. All that money, untouched. And here we are, stressing about rent and credit cards." Marquise didn't respond. He didn't like where the conversation was heading. Curtin didn't press. That was his gift, knowing how to plant seeds without sounding like he was digging. Over the next few weeks, the comments grew sharper, more pointed. "You know she ain't even put you in that will yet, right? She say she trust in you, but she ain't even invest in your ideas. I heard her on the phone talking about moving her money around, probably setting herself up to leave you both behind." Curtin wasn't just manipulating. He was poisoning, slowly, expertly. Marquise was already vulnerable. After a string of temp jobs that ended without warning, he was behind on his car note and dodging texts from people he owed. Gambling had stopped being a thrill and become a cycle. Bet, lose, chase, borrow. He hadn't told anyone, but a debt collector had called the house line once. Pauletta picked up. She didn't say anything afterward, but her look cut deeper than words. And then there was Skyla, slipping further away from him with each passing day. She was still showing up, still sleeping over, but something about her had changed. She didn't laugh at his jokes anymore, didn't ask how his interviews went. When he tried to kiss her one night, she turned her head. Curtin, on the other hand, had become warmer toward Skyla and colder toward Marquise. The dynamic was shifting, and Marquise could feel it. Everyone in that house was moving around him like he was in the way. One night, Curtin said it outright. "If she was gone, things'd be different," he muttered. "You'd be free. I'd be free. That money? It'd fix everything. Clean slate." Marquise stood still, eyes bloodshot. "What you mean? Gone?" Curtin looked at him without blinking. "I'm saying life could be easier if we stopped letting her control it." Marquise snapped, threw a chair across the room, called him sick, disgusting, said he'd never hurt his mother, no matter how bad things got. Stormed out with his fists clenched and heart pounding. Outside, the night swallowed him. He paced, cursed, kicked a trash can. He didn't know where to go, only that he couldn't breathe inside that house anymore. As he pulled away in his car, tires screeching, Skyla stood by the living room window. She didn't flinch, just watched him disappear down the street. Then she turned to Curtin and said quietly, "He's almost ready." It started with a knock, or maybe just the sound of keys fumbling at the door. Whatever it was past midnight when Marquise stumbled into the house, his breath sour with alcohol, his eyes reddened from the haze of pills and smoke. His shirt was wrinkled, damp from sweat and someone else's spilled drink. His steps were uneven, his thoughts even more so. The house was quiet, dark, except for the soft glow in the kitchen, the kind of light Pauletta always left on when her son hadn't come home. She was sitting at the counter, robe wrapped tight, hands folded. Not angry, just tired. "Marquise," she said gently, barely above a whisper, "where you been, baby?" That question, so simple, so maternal, so human. But to Marquise, in that fractured state, it sounded like judgment, like shame, like every failure he'd been running from had just pulled up a chair next to him. He didn't answer, just dropped his keys hard on the counter and walked past her. "Hey," she said again, rising to her feet. "I just asked a question. You okay?" He turned fast, eyes wild. "Don't start." "I'm not starting nothing, I'm just—" "You always on me. Every damn time I walk in this house, it's something." She stepped forward, palms raised. "You high? Man, back up off me." "Marquise." And then it happened. The push. It wasn't measured or restrained. It was angry, impulsive, reckless. Pauletta's back hit the edge of the counter and her head snapped sideways into the wooden cabinet. A sound left her mouth, halfway between a gasp and a moan. She slid down to the floor, head tilted, eyes fluttering. He stood over her, breathing heavy, the room spinning. His heart thudded against his chest. She wasn't moving, not fully, just breathing slow. Unconscious, but alive. Something twisted in him. Shame, power, confusion. It all blurred. He dropped to his knees, whispered her name, touched her face. Then his hand moved, to her waist, then lower. And then he sexually assaulted her in the most devastating way possible. It was crazy. The act was slow, hazy, disconnected from reality. He wasn't there, Not fully. He was someone else, or no one at all. The sound of his mother's shallow breath filled the room, along with the low hum of the refrigerator. And then, footsteps. Curtin appeared at the edge of the hallway. Silent. Still. Watching. Marquise froze. His breath hitched. His hands trembled. For a split second, the air cracked open like it might collapse. But Curtin didn't yell. He didn't run. He didn't even flinch. He turned, walked down the hallway, disappeared into his bedroom. Marquise stared after him, frozen in a crouch over his unconscious mother. It wasn't until he heard the soft click of a drawer and the heavier return of footsteps that his body truly understood what was happening. Curtin reappeared, holding a pistol in his right hand. He didn't lift it. He didn't point it. He just extended it, like a man offering a set of car keys. "Do it," he said. Marquise stared at the gun, then at his father, then back down at his mother. "She already gone, son. Just finish it." Marquise didn't answer. His hands moved like they weren't his. He took the gun, held it loose. Tears welled, but didn't fall. And then, 4 shots. Each one louder than the last, each one cutting through the house like a door slammed shut. Pauletta Wynne, mother, wife, entrepreneur, daughter of legacy, was gone. And her killers were both still breathing. The smoke hadn't even cleared when Marquise dropped the gun. It hit the tile floor with a lifeless clatter, spinning once before settling like a final period on a sentence no one should have written. He stared at his hands. They were shaking, sticky, still hovering in the air like they couldn't accept what they'd just done. Across from him, Pauletta's body lay twisted, blood pooling under her arm, her head tilted back, eyes vacant. The silence was unbearable. Then, the smell, the metal, the smoke, the finality. Marquise staggered back, hitting the edge of the counter. What did I do?" he murmured. The haze was fading now. The adrenaline gave way to nausea, and the weight of it all collapsed on him like a falling roof. Curtin remained calm. Too calm. He stepped forward slowly, took the gun from the floor using his t-shirt as a barrier, and walked to the sink. He rinsed it quickly, then wrapped it in a kitchen towel and placed it in a drawer. No panic. No urgency. Just the mechanical rhythm of a man who had rehearsed this moment in his mind too many times to be rattled now. Marquise dropped to his knees beside his mother's body, sobbing now. His palms touched her arm, her wrist, her face. "Mama, Mama, no. Mama, I didn't." But there was no reversing it. The warmth was leaving her skin already. What he'd done had outrun the drugs, outrun the shame. It had become real. Behind him, Curtin pulled out his phone. He dialed 911 with the casual confidence of a man ordering pizza. "Yeah," he said, voice calm even. "I need police and medical support out here. My son just shot my wife. He came home drunk, got violent. He's still here. She's not breathing." The operator asked questions. Curtin answered like he was filling out a survey. No cracks in his voice, no tremble, no hint of the fact that he was the one who had guided every step to this moment. Marquise didn't register the call right away. He was still crumpled on the floor, rocking back and forth. But as Curtin hung up, he turned to his son and said, "They're on the way. You should sit still. Don't make this worse than it already is." Marquise looked up, confusion cutting through the horror. "Wait, you told them it was me?" Curtin didn't blink. "You pulled the trigger. That's what they'll see." "But you gave me the gun?" Curtin's voice dropped lower. "Don't talk crazy. You were high. You got mad. Things got out of hand. I walked in too late." "No, you said—" "I said nothing, and you best remember that." Marquise stood now, stumbling backward. His mind was spinning again, but not from drugs this time, from betrayal. Full, total betrayal. His father, his guide, his co-conspirator had flipped the script, and now he was the story's only villain. By the time the police arrived, the scene was already perfectly set. The distraught father, the weapon tucked away in the kitchen drawer, the son, incoherent and shaking, still covered in blood. The body, lifeless, still warm. It all fit. They cuffed Marquise with force. He didn't resist, didn't cry out. He just stared blankly at the flashing lights reflecting off the living room walls, unable to speak, unable to believe that this, all of this, was real. Curtin stood on the porch giving his statement, voice low and filled with fatherly grief. But if anyone had looked close, they might have seen it. Just for a moment. The faintest flicker of satisfaction behind his eyes. The vigil for Pauletta Wynne was held 4 days after her death. Soft hymns played from a Bluetooth speaker in the corner of the church annex. Tea lights in glass jars lined the walkway. Friends, stylists, and clients from her salon gathered in clusters, some crying openly, others stunned into silence. It wasn't just grief in the air. It was confusion. How does a mother, a wife, a business owner die like that? Killed by her own son? Curtin stood near the front, with his head bowed and voice low. When people asked what happened, he gave the same polished reply. Marquise came home intoxicated. Pauletta tried to calm him down. Things escalated. I wish I could have stopped it. Some cried harder when he spoke. A few hugged him. But Gloria Ford, Pauletta's older cousin, stood at the back, watching him like a hawk. She'd known Curtin too long. Long enough to recognize when his smile didn't reach his eyes. Long enough to know when his story was a little too clean. What stuck out first was his speech. He spoke at the vigil like a man reading a script. Not a single word out of place. No stumbles. No cracks in his voice. He mentioned Pauletta's strength, her faith, her love for Marquise, but nothing about their recent tension. Nothing about his own guilt for not stopping it. He cried, but Gloria had seen him cry before. This wasn't that. These were performance tears, the kind you practice in a mirror. Afterward, she approached him with a hug and a question. You seen Skyla since all this happened? She asked. Curtin blinked, the only time his rhythm broke. Skyla? Yeah, Marquise's girlfriend. She was always around. I figure she'd be grieving too. Curtin cleared his throat. Haven't seen her. She probably keeping her distance. Can't blame her. Gloria didn't push. Not then. But a seed had planted. The next day, she called one of the stylists from the salon, a younger woman who often saw Skyla come and go. Did Skyla ever mention being at the house that night? Gloria asked casually. There was a pause. Yeah, actually. I remember her saying she dropped by late. She left something in Marquise's room. Thought that was weird. It was the same night everything went down. That was all Gloria needed to hear. Skyla had been there, but not in any of Curtin's accounts. Why hide her? What else hadn't he said? Gloria didn't go to the police, not yet. She went to someone she trusted. Her goddaughter's husband, Thomas, worked for a regional security firm. Smart home installations, motion sensors, doorbell cameras, the kind of man who could check a system discreetly. I just need you to look, she told him. Tell me if anyone came or left the house that night. Thomas was hesitant, but agreed. Within 48 hours, he sent her a screenshot. A clear image. Skyla James, stepping onto the Wynne porch at 11:38 p.m. Another at 6:07 a.m., walking away with her shoes in her hand. Gloria stared at the pictures for a long time. Her stomach turned. Why was Skyla at the house all night? And why did Curtin never mention it? She didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew a cover-up when she saw one. She'd seen enough in her lifetime. Family scandals, quiet divorces, things swept under rugs for the sake of appearances. But this was bigger. This was lethal. And whatever had happened inside that house wasn't just about a son who lost control. It was about a man who'd lost his soul. Gloria Ford didn't waste time once she had the screenshots. She knew the police wouldn't open the case wider on whispers and suspicion alone. But video? Time-stamped? Unedited? Direct from the house? That was different. She printed both images of Skyla, one entering, one leaving, and walked them straight into the Peoria Police Department. It didn't take long for things to shift. Investigators requested full access to the Wynn Homes smart security system. With Gloria's quiet nudge and a judge's quick approval, the footage was reviewed. The timeline was clear. Skyla arrived just before midnight and didn't leave until after 6 a.m. That fact alone collapsed the narrative Curtin had given. That he'd been asleep until the gunshots woke him, and that Skyla hadn't been present at all. Skyla was pulled in for questioning. She lied at first, saying she had only come by earlier that day to drop off something for Marquise, but when confronted with the footage, her story cracked. She admitted to being there overnight, admitted to talking with Mr. Wynn, but denied knowing anything about the murder. "I was asleep in the guest room," she claimed. "I heard shots and left before anyone saw me." Detectives didn't buy it, and by then, more was coming in. A lab test came back showing traces of gunshot residue on the right sleeve of one of Curtin's long-sleeve T-shirts, the same one he was wearing in the doorbell footage during the early hours of that morning. He claimed he'd only picked up the weapon after the shots, but the spatter pattern and burn residue said otherwise. Things worsened when Marquise's phone was unlocked. In the deleted messages folder, tech analysts recovered a text thread with Skyla, but it was what they found on Curtin's phone, backed up on a forgotten cloud account, that shifted the case entirely. A message sent from Curtin to Skyla, dated 2 days before the murder. "Once it's done, it's just us. Everything we talked about. No more looking back." There was no way to misinterpret it. The language wasn't vague, it wasn't poetic. It was a signal, a promise after something irreversible, a conspiracy sealed in digital ink. When detectives returned to interrogate Marquise a second time, they approached differently. No yelling, no accusations, just the truth, laid out on the table. Skyla had been there. Curtin had lied. The residue on the shirt. The message. Marquise broke. He didn't sob. He didn't lash out. He just lowered his head and began to talk. About the debts. About the shame. About the push and the panic and the moment he blacked out. And finally, about the gun. He told them what Curtin did. How he didn't stop the assault. How he didn't yell or run. How he simply handed him the weapon like it was a chore to finish. "I thought he'd say something. Stop me," Marquise murmured. He just watched, like he was waiting. The confession came with weight, but also clarity. Marquise didn't excuse himself. He knew what he'd done, but he no longer wanted to die protecting a lie that had been planted in his head from the start. The investigators stepped back and looked at the full picture. A mother dead, a son unraveling, a girlfriend hiding, and a father orchestrating. Curtin Wynn wasn't grieving, he was calculating. But now, the numbers were turning against him. They came for Curtin Wynn on a Wednesday morning. No sirens, no drama. just two unmarked vehicles pulling up to the curb as he watered the front lawn, still playing the part of a man in mourning. He didn't resist. Didn't ask why. He already knew. The same man who used to lead neighborhood watch meetings, who gave career advice to local teens, who stood weeping at his wife's vigil, was now in handcuffs, facing a string of charges that read like the pages of a crime novel. First-degree conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to homicide, and sexual abuse by coercion. Some neighbors refused to believe it. Curtin? No way, one man told police. That man served his country, loved his family. Others weren't surprised. Quietly, stories began to surface. Curtin's temper, his financial troubles, his reputation with younger women. Things people had whispered about for years, but never connected. Until now. The courtroom was packed for his arraignment. Pauletta's salon staff filled 2 rows. Former clients came in heels and scarves, silent and furious. Gloria sat front row, face unreadable, eyes locked on the man she once hugged at cookouts. Curtin entered in cuffs, his face flat, as if caught between annoyance and boredom. When the charges were read aloud, there was a ripple through the courtroom, a wave of breath held and let go too fast. Then came the second name, Skyla James. Her name appeared in the indictment as a co-conspirator. By then, she had vanished. Police issued a warrant and traced her to an aunt's apartment in Missouri. She was arrested 3 days later, found packing a duffel bag and burner phone. Prosecutors painted her as a manipulator and a pawn. She dated Marquise while seducing Curtin, kept both men emotionally hooked, and knew the plan long before Pauletta ever hit the floor. The messages proved it. So did her silence. But the biggest blow came when Marquise agreed to testify, against both of them. His confession became the state's backbone. He admitted to the assault, the shooting, the influence. But he also spoke about manipulation. How Curtin whispered ideas like poison, how Skyla withdrew affection as a tactic, how he spiraled so far he mistook pressure for love and violence for escape. Some believed he was just trying to save himself. Others saw a boy who'd been shattered long before that night. Legally, the deal was simple. Reduced charges in exchange for testimony. Instead of life, he faced 18 years with eligibility for parole after 12. But in the court of public opinion, his sentence felt heavier. He wasn't just a criminal. He was a walking contradiction. The son who killed his mother. The victim who became the weapon. Curtin pled not guilty. His defense called him a grieving father wrongly accused and painted Skyla as a temptress who divided a household. But the evidence was unshakable. The texts, the footage, the residue. His military past meant nothing now. The verdict was inevitable. Guilty on all counts. Sentenced to life without parole. Skyla, too, eventually pled out, 15 years without parole. No one cried for her when the gavel dropped. After the sentencing, Gloria gave a short statement. She trusted him with her life, she said, her voice steady. And he took it for profit. There ain't a prison long enough for that. The front windows of Pauletta Wynn's salon still faced the same busy street, still caught the same morning sun, but everything inside had changed. The laughter was softer, the music lower. The conversations paused more often now, as if everyone inside was remembering how quickly a moment, a life, could be taken. After the verdict, Gloria Ford stepped in to manage the salon. Not because she wanted to, but because no one else could. Pauletta hadn't appointed a successor. Her will was clear about the money, but the business had been her heartbeat, not just a brand, but a sanctuary. Gloria kept it running the way Pauletta would have wanted. Clean, purposeful, and built around women who felt like family. Curtin had tried to end Pauletta's story, but all he did was make her name louder. Curtin remained in prison, aging bitterly. His appeals failed. His name never resurfaced in the news beyond court docket updates. When asked about him, former neighbors simply said, "We don't speak on that man." But Pauletta, she became something else entirely. A symbol, a conversation starter. A woman who had it all and lost it in the most intimate, calculated way possible. Her grave became a quiet stop for women leaving the salon nearby. Some came with friends. Others came alone. One teenage girl sat in front of the stone one spring afternoon and whispered, "I'm not gone. Let what happened to you happen to me." That's what legacy is, sometimes. Not the business you build or the money you leave behind, but the lesson your pain teaches others, long after your voice is gone. The story of Pauletta Wynne didn't end the night she died. It still breathes between the lines of betrayal, justice, and the unspoken things families never recover from.